Welcome to The Simplicity Effect, where we discuss messaging that matters and explore innovative ways to enhance business performance through simplicity and curiosity. I'm Tori, and today we're diving into the world of data analytics, one of my favourite topics. And I'm really excited to have Kyle Webb, a leading expert in data analytics, joining me today. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
We'll explore how businesses can leverage data analytics to improve performance. We're also going to look at how to simplify complex data and the importance of fostering curiosity. And we'll take a look at how AI is changing the way we work as well. So, Kyle, to start, could you maybe just give us a little bit of an overview of your background in data and analytics?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been in the data and analytics space coming up on, almost 15 years now. I started out in web analytics, and that was all about understanding what customers are doing on your website and how best to optimize the website to increase conversions. Then I moved more into the business intelligence and analytics space. So that involves bringing data from across the business, sales and marketing data, finance data, product analytics data, and stitching that all together to better help measure and drive business performance. So yeah, I've worked from everywhere from small startups all the way through to large telcos and kind of everything in between.
Fantastic. So obviously data can be pretty overwhelming, and as a topic as well, there's so much we could discuss. But maybe if we just start with how can businesses simplify their approach to data analytics? And I guess maybe even if we can have a think about how they just even get started.
Yeah, definitely. I know for a lot of people, data and analytics can sound quite daunting and it sounds quite complex, but it actually can be really simple. So if you're just starting out on this journey and you want to embrace data and analytics, even if it's very simple, what you're doing is you're building the foundations of a data-driven culture. So one of the key ways to get started and to keep it very simple is to just work with what you have. So for example, if a website is a core part of your business, then it might be working with Google Analytics. For others, it might be a CRM system. The fact is, if you're sitting on data that has never really been looked at or interrogated, you're bound to find some really impactful insights with the data that you're working with. The other thing is, once you know what data that you have to work with, it's really important to set out and measure 3, 4, 5 different key business metrics that you want to track using that data and agree how you're going to measure it. So some examples might be, depending on your business, it might be new leads, it might be website conversion rate, new bookings, support response time, whatever makes sense for your business and you've got the data to track, that's where I would start. I'd also encourage sharing these metrics with across the entire business so everyone has visibility over it and so everyone can see how the company is performing. Not only does this start to build that data-driven culture, it also fosters a culture of transparency and ownership where people feel invested because they can see how the company is performing, and especially as a smaller business, they feel like they can have an impact and be able to move the needle.
Yeah, and look, selfishly for me, with a background in sales and marketing and product, can you maybe share some of your thoughts and experiences specifically around, if I did want to uplift my sales and marketing, particularly at the moment, tough economic environment, how could you leverage data and analytics to do that? Yeah,
definitely. So going back to what we just said, keep it simple, use the data that you have, whether it's Google Analytics, whether it's just data that you've exported from your CRM. Once you're able to track those key metrics that we talked about, use that to find your baseline of how your business is performing now. And that's your starting point. And that's what you want to improve against. One thing I'd advise against is sort of looking at competitors and looking at industry benchmarks. At this stage, generally speaking, that's kind of rubbish. I'll give you an example. When I was working with web analytics and dealing with a lot of clients who were in the e-commerce space, they always wanted to know, how does their website conversion rate compare to the industry benchmark? And you know what? If you Google, you'll find that the industry conversion rate is between 1% or 2%, and that'll differ depending on what resource you look at. But what does that even mean? Somebody is on King Living Furniture website looking for a $5,000 leather lounge. Their conversion rate or their likelihood to buy is going to be completely different to somebody who goes on to who gives a crap website and who's, looking to restock on their monthly supply of toilet paper. So I'd advise not looking at industry benchmarks and just focus on what you can control and the data that you have and use that as a benchmark to measure yourself against.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because I know, I guess from a leadership team perspective, obviously we get quite hooked on benchmarking ourselves against competitors and industry benchmarks. So that's a really interesting point of view. So if we switch gears now and maybe dive into curiosity, obviously it's a key driver of innovation. How can businesses foster curiosity in their approach to data?
Yeah, so this is the fun part. Like everything that we've spoken about so far is basically how you can gear up your business to use the data that you have to track the metrics that are important to you. But now the really important part is to understand what the data is telling you and be able to ask why and get those answers. So, I mean, the first thing that's important in terms of, having a curiosity mindset is just, always be thinking of the why question. So even if you've got your metrics on a regular basis, being able to ask why when leads go up 20% or the conversion rate is down this month, being able to having that curious mindset to ask why, to truly understand why the numbers are moving the way that they are is kind of the first thing that you need to have. But the second part is you need to make it easy to answer those questions. So when when you do ask why, or someone in your business asks why, like how easy are they able to dig beneath the surface level metrics and get those answers? And so there's a few different ways to do this, and it kind of depends on what data that you're working with. If you're talking about something like Google Analytics, it's just literally in the tool itself, segmenting and filtering for users and trying to understand what are the movers and what's leading the numbers to change. If you have internal data, like I said, even if it's in an Excel spreadsheet or in your CRM, one really helpful tip is to use a data visualization tool like, and there's tons out there that are free or very cheap, like Looker Studio, Tableau, Power BI. What these tools allow you to do is to tap into any data source, and it can just be an Excel file, or it could be, a database with millions of rows of data. But what it allows you to do is to visualize this data in a dashboard and in a way that sort of makes it easy to interpret, but also, and probably more importantly, allows you to segment and filter and, cross-filter things that you see on the data. So, it's great to have from a reporting perspective to see what your top line, performance stats are for the month, but then being able to slice and dice and drill down and see, it was, in Australia or this region where we had good performance and there's poor performance somewhere else. That's really important. So that's one thing that I would really recommend, even if you've got data just sitting in Excel. The final point I'd make, to sort of enable that curiosity mindset is to, once you've established that sort of BAU reporting, monthly reporting, weekly reporting, one thing that's really helpful is to build out an data and analytics pipeline or projects that you can work on. And it could be, once a quarter, once a month, where you want to tackle something new. That could be a piece of analysis, like maybe 1 month or 1 quarter, you're going to start to analyze the performance of different account sizes. And that might mean you have to go back and reclassify some of the data, but it's going to be a really useful piece of insight that you didn't otherwise have. Or it could be a technical task. You could start looking around and say, hey, I'd really like data from this other system that we're using, and stitch that together to what we currently have. And you could spend, a few weeks bringing that into a place where you can mash it up with some of the other data and enhance the data set that you're working with.
Okay, and can you maybe share some really specific examples of how curiosity-driven analytics, say, might benefit marketing strategies?
Yeah, definitely. So when you've got that curious mindset and you have the tools that allow you to start peeling back the layers of data, that's when you can really strike on some nuggets of insight that will really help you make data-driven decisions and move the needle on your marketing strategy and your marketing campaigns. One very simple example is, if we stick with the web analytics, stay in the web analytics world for a moment, one very common approach is to look at the performance of your different channels that are driving traffic to your website. So you might look at Google PPC and see that, the overall conversion rate is 2%. And you might have some assumptions, is that good or is that bad? But if you start peeling back some more layers and start looking at, okay, well, what type of campaigns are we running? We're running, branded campaigns where people are searching for a specific brand name like Bob's Auto Repair. And we're also running generic campaigns like, Auto Repair Sydney, those types of search queries. Like, start to analyze what is the difference between those campaigns and those users, because they are fundamentally different users in terms of their familiarity with your brand and also their purchasing intent. So you might find that Obviously people who are searching for your specific brand, the conversion rate's higher. That's kind of natural. But if you're curious, you might start to find other opportunities within that. And you might find that, you're sending them to the same page, the home page, and that might work fine for people who are searching, who know your brand. But for those who are searching, generic keywords, they might need a little bit more validation. You might want to put them on a landing page that explains your business, that has social validation, strong call to action, those type of things. Those are the type of insights that you can get once you start pulling back the layers of data. And another point I'd like to make is that, when you're curious and you have data to leverage, that helps you challenge assumptions. So a lot of companies, particularly smaller companies, they operate on gut feel, and that can be okay. But it can also kill a business, especially in a competitive landscape. So to give you one, real world example I've had in the past, let's say the sales team has been pushing the marketing team to target and acquire new leads from smaller accounts because, from the sales perspective, they have a high close rate, they close pretty quickly and they make a large portion of your customer base. But, if you're curious, if you want to sort of understand, is this actually valuable to our company, you can start looking at that, segmenting the data you have, and you might find that, hey, for these small accounts, sales is doing a great job of closing them, but they actually have a really high churn rate, or maybe they're taking up a disproportionate amount of resources in terms of support and training. And having that data and having that curiosity to go and find it gives you the insight that you need to, maybe guide the sales team or work on your marketing strategy and say, hey, let's focus on the larger customers. They might have longer lead times, they might have lower close rate, but they are ultimately the type of customers that are going to help our business grow.
Okay, and while we're chatting about marketing specifically and customer engagement, from a messaging perspective, what are the most important metrics businesses should focus on when analysing performance and really trying to optimise that performance? You kind of gave quite a good example then, but can you maybe share from a messaging perspective?
Yeah, for messaging specifically, some of the key metrics that you can look at are engagement rate. Unsubscribe rates is an interesting one, as well as conversion rate. So you could look at, is your message resonating? Are people, if there's a call to action in the message itself, what percentage of people are clicking on that? And then from there, once they hit your website, are they, actually converting? So if it's a Black Friday sale, these would be really important metrics to look at. But also, as I mentioned, the unsubscribe rate as well, that's an indication, that's a negative metric, but it's also an indication if you're, spamming people, if you're hitting people up at the wrong time and actually pushing them away from your brand. Okay,
so you raise a really important point, which is obviously the metric you choose to measure will depend on what your objective is, what the activity is, presumably even what industry you work in. So given that, how do you actually decide which metrics are important? Yeah,
I think context is definitely really important, and it's really important to set out what metrics you want to track beforehand. The good thing is that while it's important, it's actually really easy to do. So what you should do is look at the objectives of whatever campaign that you're sending out. So for example, like I mentioned, a Black Friday sale, you're obviously trying to drive people to your website, and obviously you want them to convert. So things like looking at the overall conversion rate of SMSs sent through to conversion on your website, but also breaking that up and saying, okay, well, what is the click-through rate of the message? Because that tells you information about which copy is working well. Is it enticing them to actually click on that and go to your website? And then from there, what is the conversion rate of people who land on your website and ultimately convert? Because that is about the journey on the website. Are you making it easy to purchase? Is the messaging correct? That sort of thing. Whereas, take another example. If you've got a campaign that is getting customer feedback and reviews, then you'd look at things like, what is the response rate? Are people replying when you ask them for a review, or how they rated your service, that sort of thing? You'd be looking at things like the response rate. So keeping the context of what you're trying to achieve in the campaign is really important, and that will define, what metrics you should be looking at when you want to analyze how it's performed. Okay, and I know some of us can be a little bit guilty, given how much we've got on our plate, of basically doing really great analysis after the fact to kind of assess the effectiveness, basically, of the activity and whether we want to run it again. But to really improve performance,
in real time and optimize the activity whilst it's in market, what kind of metrics should people be looking at, or what kind of activities should they be undertaking?
Yeah, so once you've sort of defined what metrics, as we just mentioned, are important to a campaign, one really helpful thing you can do is to test your messaging. So one of the great things about SMS messaging is that it's typically high volume. So you have the luxury of being able to say, all right, I'm going to split my audience into 2, 3, 4 different buckets, and I'm going to try different copies to see which one has the highest engagement rate and then ultimately conversion rate as well. And so you can test, in a live environment, which of those copies work best in ultimately driving conversions. And then you can take that knowledge, once you see the results, you can take that knowledge to the next campaign and just continuously iterate and improve that baseline metric.
Okay, and I guess often you hear terms like predictive analytics and propensity scores thrown around, and sometimes it sounds a little bit daunting. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about how predictive analytics can be applied to drive better outcomes and really kind of break it down for us?
Yeah, so in this world where we're talking about AI and machine learning and all of that, you're right. Like some of these terms can become jumbled together and sound very confusing and complex. But if you break it down, predictive analytics is really quite simple. It's essentially using data to predict future trends or events. So what it does is it allows you to basically anticipate user behavior. Now, where this applies in messaging is predictive analytics can basically help you personalize your outreach. So what this means is targeting the right customer at the right time with the right message. And not only is this good for your business, it'll increase engagement and conversion rates, but it also improves the customer experience as well, because they're getting messages that are relevant to them in the moment. So that's at a high level, like how you can use predictive analytics in the messaging environment.
Okay. And do you need a Kyle to get started? What are some of the simple ways businesses can start implementing predictive analytics in their messaging? And obviously maybe just giving thought to some of the privacy and data regulatory environment as well. Obviously with AI out there, you don't want to be uploading all of your customer data to ChatGPT.
Yeah, so like we were saying with data and analytics, as in general, it's as simple or as complex as you like. There's obviously companies spending millions of dollars trying to predict what their customers are going to do next, but you can make it really, really simple. And fundamentally, what you're trying to do is understand what your user journey looks like. What are all the different touch points and behaviors that a customer has that then lead to an outcome, whether that's desirable like a purchase or undesirable like a churn, which is obviously relevant to service providers like us. So if you were to sort of take away and understand predictive analytics, one of the key things you can do is like look at your past data from customers who were, let's say, sent certain messages at certain times in the user journey, and which ones led to desirable outcomes. So they signed up or they purchased, that sort of thing. And then using that information to better target customers at the right time in the future. The other point I made to your second question or your second point is in a world where we need to be very mindful of the data that we're using and privacy and all of that, one of the key fundamental things with data and analytics in general is only use the data that you need. So if you're doing predictive analytics, you don't need phone numbers and addresses and email addresses to do this type of analysis. You're just looking for general user behavior and trends. So, if you don't need the data, don't use it. And that will help you build a safe analytics journey where you're not going to be, compromising any customer information.
Okay, so as we wrap up, could you summarize the key takeaways and also I guess what are the real crucial points that we all need to remember about leveraging data analytics, particularly in the context of one-to-one messaging?
Yeah, so, as we said a few times, just keep it simple. Work with what you have, build out those key metrics and don't overthink it. Just, what are the 3, 4, 5 key metrics that are really going to drive your business and you need to have visibility over. And then once you have those key metrics, be curious. Always be thinking about the why and make it easy to get to those answers and scratch below the surface, because those are going to give you the insights that you need to figure out what to do next and how to improve your business and your marketing strategies and all of that. And lastly, empower yourself with the data. So use data to make decisions, to challenge assumptions. And if you use it to make smarter decisions, that's going to help you as a business and also help your customers as well.
Great. So firstly, I want to say a big thank you to you, Kyle, for joining us today. And we hope that everyone listening got a lot out of the session. And I guess my key takeout for today was really that reminder around sometimes the simplest questions lead to the most impactful insights. So until next time, keep innovating and stay curious about your data.
Book your demo today and experience Kudosity in action.